Hello everyone, welcome to part 1 of my offensive security series. I'll be starting here on Kernel Meltdown. In this video, I'll be going over the basics of penetration testing, such as identifying services on a specific target system, identifying vulnerabilities behind those services, and the basic techniques for exploiting those vulnerabilities. So for everyone who went to my hands-on workshop on this talk, I apologize, the recording did not save during the saving process, so hopefully this video will make up for that. So let's get started. So about me. I'm Dennis Maldonado, some people call me Linus, that's my IRC handle. I have a blog at kernelmeltdown.org/blog, and there I post many tutorials and walkthroughs on securities, and I also post news and events, what's going on. I post information on the latest tools and how to use those tools, and I'll also be posting my recordings and PowerPoints up there when I have my lectures, walkthroughs, or these videos. I also just broke into the Twitter game, so follow me on Twitter. I'm posting on there as well. I'm also following a lot of security people in the industry, so there's a lot of good information to be shared on Twitter, so follow me there. I'm also on IRC. If you go to freenode.net, you can find me in the Cougar CS channel. That's our student organization at the University of Houston, Cougar Computer Science. I'm always on there 24/7, so you can contact me at any time, ask me questions, hang out, chat, whatever you want to do. You can also email me, dennis@kernelmeltdown.org. You can email me feedback, questions, comments, anything. So let's get started. So definitions. What is a vulnerability? A vulnerability is, like it says here, a weakness in a system or a service that allows an attacker to take control of the system by exploiting that vulnerability. A vulnerability could be maybe someone programmed a pointer wrong in their program, or something was configured incorrectly. A good example of a vulnerability is the infamous MS-0867 vulnerability. The MS-0867 vulnerability was a vulnerability discovered years ago in 2008 for the Windows 2000, 2003 XP, and apparently Vista in 2008 operating systems, where an attacker can just send specifically crafted packets to a vulnerable system and have that system be compromised almost instantly because of the contents of that exploit in the payload. And it was as simple as just finding a system with file sharing enabled, with SMB ports open, and sending that system packets and gaining control of the system. So another vulnerability example is the Very Secure FTPD vulnerability. Very Secure FTP, Damien, is a software you can download for Linux. Where it's an FTP server software, and here there was a vulnerability discovered where any remote authenticated users can crash the system, can cause the system to use more CPU than it needs, and causing the system to go down for a while. So that's another example of vulnerability, and here we'll be going over an example of an SMB vulnerability on Linux. So what is vulnerability assessment? Vulnerability assessment is the act of finding and identifying those vulnerabilities. We would identify services running on the specific victim, and we would identify what is running behind those services, what their versions are, and then try to see if we can find vulnerabilities for those. And then once we find vulnerabilities for those, we would exploit them. And the exploit is the code that allows us to take advantage of the vulnerability. It allows us to either crash the system or crash the service, which then we can run our own code, and the service would connect back to us, and we have control of the system. A payload is usually bundled with the exploit, and it's a piece of code that executes after the exploit has been run on the target. And the payload can be many things. It could be a bunch of tools, to open up a backdoor on the system, to tools to connect back to us so we can have a shell with the system. A payload is commonly known as the virus, the virus that no one wants on their computer. So a backdoor, like I mentioned, is a way of bypassing normal authentication. You know how you similar to how you have your front door in your house and your back door leading to the back porch. Well, if your front door was locked, was securely locked, I can try to find my way through the back door, which maybe has weaker locks or no locks at all. You know, it's another way of getting into the system, and maybe in the payload I would put in an SSH server so I can log in through that SSH server instead of logging in through normal means. Um, and the shell is just the interface with the system, and that's how we'll be interfacing with our victims once we are able to exploit them. The shell is typically a command line interface, and there we can do anything like view the system files, delete them, edit them, add users, remove users, etc., etc. So, what are the steps in a penetration test? The first thing we need to do is we need to do some information gathering. We need to gather information on our target, see who are we attacking, what are they doing, what are they running, how are they configured, and just what do they have on them, what's interesting to us. So there's many ways we can do that. We can do who is, if it's a domain, we can do who is, so who owns the domain, where they're located, what their IP address information is, and everything. And then another thing we can do is, do they have a web server? Can we type in their IP address or their domain in the web browser, and does a website pop up? And the website can tell us a lot. It can tell us what they're doing, what their purpose is, what they're running, what software are they running to host that web server by analyzing the packets that come back to us, the headers, or even what software is in the backend. Are they running PHP, MySQL, Oracle, etc., etc. And then we can use a tool called Nmap. An Nmap is a port scanner tool we can use to identify ports and services running on our target system. So we would use Nmap to scan this IP address or this domain, and it would report back to us to the best of its knowledge what ports are open on the system, what ports are closed, and what ports are, well, what else is responding up there. We can also use Nmap to identify the operating system, or give its best guess on the operating system and the services behind each port. So the vulnerability identification is using Nmap or other scanning tools to identify what exactly is running behind those ports, try to guess the best version of the services running behind those ports, and hopefully also identifying the operating system. Maybe the web server is IIS and it reports the exact operating system, or maybe there's Samba ports open and it reports the operating system, the name, the language, and everything. So vulnerability identification is identifying the services, the versions, and then checking, do we know if there's any already known vulnerabilities for those specific services or operating systems, or maybe we can go as deep as finding them ourselves. So once we identify vulnerabilities, we would then go to exploitation. We would try to exploit those vulnerabilities. Maybe there's an SSH remote server open, and we can try brute forcing to guess the username and password, or the password if we found the username somewhere else. We just keep guessing until we get in. And there's also remote exploits. If this was a Windows XP machine that's not been patched, then we can run the MS0867 vulnerability in Metasploit and instantly compromise the system. So once we compromise the system, then we go to post-exploitation, and that's, like, for example, that's what the payload does. That's where the payload would put a reverse shell on the system, and the reverse shell will connect back to us, and then we can do stuff like persistence, so we can get back in. The shell would connect back to us every 15 minutes or so, or we can put in our own backdoors, and then we can also do things like anti-forensics. Let's say you view a file, but you don't want or you edit a file, and you don't want people to detect to see the timestamps get modified, so you use a tool called timestamp to alter the timestamps and put them back to their original state or whatever. And there's a bunch of other techniques that we'll go into in other later videos. So the tools we'll be using here are Backtrack Linux. Backtrack Linux 5, currently the versions are 3, but R2 and R1 will work as well. Backtrack Linux is a distribution of Linux based on Ubuntu currently, and the beauty of it is its convenience. You can run it live off the CD. Once you download the ISO, just burn it to a CD or put it to USB and it'll run live. There's also a VMware image. It's all configured. All you have to do is download the VMware image and run the VMX file. It is very convenient because all the tools are already built in, installed, and configured for you. So if you want to use Metasploit, if you want to use Nmap, if you want to use Nikto, the Sloth toolkit for forensics, anything, it's already there for you. All you have to do is execute it, and that's about it. So Backtrack Linux is a great thing to look at, to download. You can follow my blog. If you look at my blog, I have a nice little guide there on how to get started with Backtrack. And then there's also Nmap. We'll be using Nmap. Like I said, it's a port scanner. We'll use it to identify ports and services running on our victim. And then once we identify those ports and services, we'll use the Metasploit framework, which we'll be using for exploiting and generating a payload and uploading that payload to our victim, and then post-exploitation techniques. So Metasploit. What is the Metasploit framework? Well, in its most, if I can explain the most basic way I can, the Metasploit framework is just a huge database of exploits and tools to aid in offensive security, penetration testing, all that stuff. It is open source and it is cross-platform. It's made in Ruby and you can download it for Windows, Unix, and Linux. And it has a bunch of built-in features such as tools for information gathering and information gathering and fingerprinting, exploitation tools and exploits itself for exploiting the MS-08 vulnerability or exploiting ProFTPD or VSFTP vulnerabilities or exploiting all these vulnerabilities. There's also tools for generating payloads for after you exploit the system and encoding them to bypass antivirus. And then there's also a bunch of tools for fuzzing and application security and all that other stuff. There's a lot of tools. I recommend you look into it. Download it for anything if you're not using Backtrack, and look at the documentation, read it. It is a very awesome tool to look into and to read about. So what are the steps in compromising the system? We have our victim here, the cat, and we have our attacker, because all hackers wear ski masks when they're hacking. So the first thing we have to do is we have to scan our victim to see what are they running. First, are they online? Yes. And then what are they running if they're online? Is there any ports open? Do they have any firewalls blocking anything? What exactly are they doing? And then once that's done, we would get a report of what the open ports are and the fingerprints, like the versions of what's running behind those ports. And once we do have that information, we can either we can research those services and versions and find, are there any known exploits. We can search the Metasploit database to see if there's any exploits there. And then once we find one, we would send that exploit. We would configure an exploit and a payload and send those right to the attacker, right to the victim, excuse me, to try to exploit his system and gain control of it. And once that's successful, the victim would connect back to us with the reverse shell. And I didn't explain earlier, but what are the beauties of a reverse shell is typically, for those familiar with a Trojan, the basic form of a Trojan is a virus that infects a victim's computer, and then the Trojan will create a tiny little server so the attacker can connect back to it later. Well, the thing about that is the firewalls today. Firewalls are easy to get. Windows has their own firewalls. We have NAT firewalls. They block incoming connections by default. So Trojans aren't really that effective anymore because we have all these firewalls blocking everything. Well, the beauty of the reverse shell is once we get the payload onto the victim, the reverse shell will actually connect back to the attacker as an outgoing connection. And typically, firewalls such as the Windows firewall and NAT firewalls don't block outgoing connections by default. So we can use reverse shells to bypass firewalls that way, and we can use ports like port 80 or 443 to make our reverse shells look more like legitimate traffic, such as SSL. So that's the steps in compromising. Let's actually break into a full-on demo of how we do that. So in this quick demo, I've set up a small virtual lab with VMware Workstation, and here I have Backtrack 5 R2, which I'll be using as the attacker system, and I have Metasploitable, which I will be using as a victim system. And for those who don't know what Metasploitable is, it's a purposely built vulnerable operating system configured with a bunch of vulnerable services used to aid people in learning how to use the tools for penetration testing and exploitation and everything. So Metasploitable is good to look at. If you can check out my blog here, and you can see there's a good walkthrough on how to get started, how to get Metasploitable set up and running, so you can set up your own little lab. So if you see here, here's Metasploitable, and here's the IP address 192.168.1.81. This will be our target for today. Later in future videos, I'll be going over how to identify potential targets on a network. But today, just for the sake of the speed, I'll be specifying the exact target for today. So here is Backtrack. Let me full screen. Here we go. So here's Backtrack, and I've opened up a terminal. You can do that over here. And the first thing we need to do is we need to use Nmap to identify what's running on our target, and also to identify if our target is live. So how do we do that? If you look at the documentation for Nmap, Nmap, you can see that this is a network exploring tool, a port scanner, and you can see the synopsis, how to use the tool, the description, and let me maximize this, and some examples on how to use this tool. So let's use Nmap in its most basic form. You can press Q to get out of that. Let's clear the screen. So to use Nmap in its most basic port scanning form, you would just type in the tool Nmap, and the target, in this case, is the IP address 192.168.1.81, I believe. And you press enter, and during the process, you can press a key at any time, and it'll tell you the current the status of the scan, what percentage is done. In this case, it finished really fast because the servers are all virtual. It's right there next to each other, and you can see the results. Here's the scan report for this IP address. The host is up, and the amount of closed ports. And here is where it shows us the open ports, well, the ports, the status, the state of the ports, and the services likely running behind the ports, as well as the MAC address. So here we have port 21, which is the known FTP port, SSH 22, 23. All this information is great information because now we know we can possibly use SSH to log in remotely. We can check out what's running on the FTP server. We have these two Samba ports open, which Samba is known for its vulnerabilities. We have MySQL open, Postgres, everything. But what do we need to do next? We need to find out exactly what is running behind these ports and find out what are the versions of these services and are they potentially vulnerable. So let's look into that. So how do we do that? Nmap has a lot of advanced options that can do a lot of work for us. In this case, we're going to use the version scanning option, and the way we do that is we type nmap dash lowercase s capital V, and that's version scan, and then we type in the IP address. And what that would do is that would query these open ports for additional information and hopefully provide us greater detail on what's running. And as you can see, I'm pressing a key and it's giving me the status of these ports. I mean, the status of the scan. We're 41% done here. And once we have this information, here we go. We can search Metasploit, or we can search ExploitDB, or we can search the internet and have any known vulnerabilities. So as you can see here, here's FTP port 21, and you see here it's running Pro FTP FTPD 1.3.1. Here's OpenSSH 4.7. ISC bind 9.4.2, Apache. We have a web server open. Um, all this good stuff. Um, and you can now search the internet, see, is there a vulnerability for ProFTPD 1.3.1? Today, we're going to be looking at Samba, since, like I said, old versions of Samba have quite a few pretty well-known vulnerabilities that allow us to gain root to the system. So what do we need to do next? Now we can launch the Metasploit tool, the Metasploit framework, so that we can access all of its exploits and search for any exploits and use the tools to identify versions. So the way we do that in Backtrack is we just type msf console, and that's going to launch the console interface for Metasploit. Metasploit has a bunch of other interfaces such as command line interface, a GUI interface with Armitage, a web interface for the community and pro versions. But today we'll be using the console interface so we can learn the commands, learn how to use it, and we can know exactly what it's doing. So here we go. We have Metasploit open. As you can see, it has a pretty cool splash screen here. There's a lot of, it's like it's the random ones, but it tells us the version of Metasploit it's running, the amount of exploits it has, the payloads, the auxiliary modules. And the auxiliary modules, I forgot to mention, it's just another name for tools, in my opinion. That's where the login tools, the scanner tools, the server tools are there. And then we have also the post-exploitation modules and the encoders and the no-op slides and everything. So if you look back here, we have port 139 and 445 open for Samba, right? The problem is, it's not telling us the exact version number for Samba, and we would really like to know that to see if there's any known exploits for that. So luckily, Metasploit has this covered. There is an auxiliary module in Metasploit that can be used to query the exact version for SMB or Samba ports. So let's start by searching. Metasploit has a cool search feature that, well, let's cancel that. I don't want to search everything. Metasploit has a cool search feature where you can search a certain string and they would report back what's available for the string. So let's search Samba. So type in search space Samba, and you can see we have a lot of matching modules here. We have certain auxiliary modules, we have exploits, and then we have all this other information. So we're interested in the auxiliary modules. I forgot that we're actually going to be searching another string. Another name for Samba is SMB, as you can see in the prior thing, port scan. So let's actually search SMB. And if we look through these, we can see auxiliary scanner SMB version. And if you see the description, we have SMB version detection, and that's exactly what we want. We want to know what version is the SMB. So let's use that. And how do we use that? If you type in the use command, it says, the use command is used to interact with the module. We want to use the SMB version module. So what we would do is we would type use, and then we can copy this. Copy auxiliary scanner SMB version. Another way to use it is you can just type it out. If you type use auxiliary and you press tab will autocomplete it for you, so you don't have to type the whole thing. Scanner SMB, pressing tab, of course. If you press tab twice, you can see the options, and we want SMB version. There it is. So once we're using the module, you can see here SMB version. We want to type info, and info will give you the information on this module. So you can see here we have the name, we have the location of the module, we have, this is Metasploit, of course, the version of the module, the ranking, in this case is an auxiliary module, so it's normal. And we have the author, and then we have the basic options, and this is the interesting stuff. I'll go over the options in a second. We also have the description. In this case, the description is pretty short, it just displays a version. So now let's type show options, and what show options will do is it will just give us the options, basically what info did, except only the options. So the first option, our hosts being plural, is the variable where we can specify more than one target host. In this case, we're only gonna specify one target host, and this module is required, so you cannot run this module without specifying an rhost. And here's the description of that rhost variable. And then for the other non-required variables, we have SMB domain. We can leave it default. We have SMB pass and user. We can leave those default because we don't know username and password. And then of course the next required one is threads, and this is basically how many times will it concurrently run this module. In this case, we don't need more than one. It's just version scanning, so we'll leave that on default. So how do we set the rhost to specify our target? To set the rhost, you would type set and then type the variable name you want to set. In this case, it's rhost, and we do all caps because that's what matches the variable name here. And when you match exactly the variable name, you can use tab to autocomplete rhosts. So set rhost 192.168.1.81 and press enter, and here you see rhost is equal to 192.168.1.81. So if you type show options again, we'll see it here again just to confirm, and once you're done with all the options, you would type run. And once that's complete, you'll see 192.168.1.81 is running Unix Samba 3.0.20 Debian. Okay, so now we can use this information to find the best exploit to try on our target. So if you remember earlier, we searched for Samba exploits and we found a bunch. Here is the list. When you type search Samba, you get a list of exploits and modules, auxiliary modules, but for now we want to look at exploits. So we have a bunch of exploits here, as well as information such as the disclosure date, the rank, and the description. The disclosure date is the date that this exploit was disclosed. The rank gives us a good ranking of the impact this exploit has on the system. So it's a good thing to look at to compare which one should I use first. And the description gives us the information of what the exploit is, and sometimes it will give us the version number as you see in here. And that's the information we need to know. So if we look at the names of these exploits, we'll see this is a good structure. We have here exploit, FreeBSD, Samba, transit to open. So this is the type of exploit, this is the service, this is the operating system, and this is what it is. It's an exploit. So looking at the information based off of this, we can determine that we do not need these because we want exploits, and we want exploits for Linux because this is, as you can see up here, a Debian system. So we can take these exploits out. These exploits have a potential to be good, so let's keep those in mind. We can also use these because as you see here, these are multi. This can be used for multiple different systems. However, we can get rid of this one because we see here in the info 2.2.2 to 2.2.6. Those are the versions that are affected by this exploit. However, our victim is running 3, so we can get rid of this. This one is a good one to use, so we can keep this. And the rest down here are not good to use because we're not running an OS X system, we're not running a Solaris system, we're not running the Citrix web application, whatever this is, when we're not running a Windows system either. And this is a post-exploitation of auxiliary module, a post-exploitation module, excuse me. So out of our options, which one is the best one? Well, if you can see, remember we have these options here. Let's look at the rankings. Good, 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 great, excellent. So this excellent ranking means it has a good good amount of impact on the system, probably as a shell or an interpreter or something. So based off the ranking, let's try this one. So if you remember earlier, we can type use and then the path to that exploit, which is multi Samba username script. If I can type properly. Again, you can use tab to autocomplete. Enter info. Okay, so I typed info. Here's the exploit we're using. Here's the path, version, the platform, and the license and all that stuff here. We also have targets, and in this case, the target is set to automatic. It's going to automatically detect the target, but in other cases, in other exploits, you might have to specify the target. Here are basic options, and here's the entire description. You can read the description, and as you see here, it gives us additional information on the versions. So the versions affected are 3.0.2 and or 0.20 in this case, sorry. And if you see what we have 3.0.20. So this exploit has a great chance of working. That's good. So if we again type show options, we need to specify the R host, but note, this time it's our host, not plural, singular. In that case, this means that this exploit will only target one target at a time, one IP address at a time, compared to the auxiliary module where we can specify more than one. So to specify this R host, it's the same thing except you get the spelling correct, R host with no S at the end, and then we type in our target 192.168.1.81. Enter. Let's confirm. We've confirmed it, and we don't have to say anything else because our port is set for us, and if we remember from our previous scans, the port is default 139, so we can keep that the same. Let's go back here. Where is our... It's somewhere. I lost it. There you go. So the port is the same, the host, there's no other additional options we need to specify. The target is set to automate, and once we're done, this is the most fun part about Metasploit, we type exploit. And there we go. So as you can see here, once we type exploit, it started the reverse double handler, which basically means it started a small server on the attacker's machine so that the victim can connect back to you if the exploit and payload was successful. And then it did all the necessary steps it needed to run the exploit on the system and execute the payload. And as you can see here, command shell session 1 has been opened with the target and the attacker at this time and date. And now we have a shell. Now I know you don't see anything there, but why don't you type in a command, let's do ls, like a Linux list files command. And there we go, we have the files on the system. If we type lsla, here's more detailed with the permissions and everything. And if we type pwd, we're in the root directory. So let's see who we are, what permissions we have. Who am I? We are roots. So it was that easy. All we had to do was find the exploit we needed to use, specify the target, type exploit, and now we are running as root. So that's the beauty of Metasploit and having a whole database of exploits and just being able to use a few tools to compromise the entire system. So what would we do from here? We would just add user lol hacked. Specify a password. Let's type in password. Full name. Yes. There you go. And so now let's see if that worked. We've specified. We've added a new user, lol hacked, that you can see down here. So let's open up a new terminal and let's try SSHing into it. SSH lol hacked into our target. Yes. We put password, and there we go. We're in. We've created a backdoor to the system, and now we can get in even if they update Samba, assuming they don't detect that we've created a new user. So that's about it. To reiterate what we did, we port scanned the system. We ran version identification for those ports. We searched for exploits for specific versions, in this case it's Samba, and then we exploited the Samba protocol with a known exploit to gain control of the system and get root. So that's the basics of this demo. You can go ahead and try that yourself. If you will follow my blog, like I said, you can find out how to get Metasploitable and Backtrack running, and you can practice this on your own. So back to the PowerPoint. How do you secure yourself? So if you remember me talking about the reverse shell earlier, let's back up a little bit. If you heard me talking about the ports, in this case, Metasploitable had no firewall running and configured, so all those ports should not have been, available for anyone to view. So if you have a firewall, such as the default Windows firewall today, that would defaultly block incoming connections unless you explicitly allow them. So a good thing to have is a firewall to prevent all those ports from being open to the internet and allowing anyone to control them or to send data to them. So a good firewall is keeping the Windows firewall on if you're running a Windows system. Komodo Personal Firewall is a good third-party solution as well for Windows systems. Also, antivirus. An antivirus is a good thing to have because the payload is pretty much a virus, and antiviruses can pick up that payload and prevent them from executing. However, Metasploitable did not have an antivirus, so we were able to run that payload. So if you were to try a default Metasploit payload, for example, on a Windows machine with Microsoft Security Essentials, the chances are Microsoft Security Essentials or Not32 will detect it and prevent it from executing. So a good antivirus and keeping it up to date is a good thing to have as well to protect yourself. And of course, keeping your systems up to date. If you, I'm not sure what the Samba version is today, but the Samba version we've exploited, 3.0.20, is pretty old, and it has vulnerabilities, and the older versions has more vulnerabilities. So what you typically want to do is keep your system and keep your software up to date, because as vulnerabilities are discovered, the developers of those services and programs will update to fix those vulnerabilities. So keep everything up to date, and that would help alleviate a lot of potential vulnerabilities you might have. And also be cautious of what you do on the internet. You want to be careful of what websites you go to, what you download, because these exploits don't have to be remote exploits. They can be local or drive-by exploits where you would go to a weird, nefarious website, and there would be a Java applet that actually contains a Metasploit payload in it. And if you're not up to date and you don't have antivirus and you're not careful where you go, you could be infected by that Java payload, and someone will be able to compromise your system just by you visiting a website. And also, just be careful what you download. A good piece of advice I've heard once was, if you don't explicitly go looking for it, don't download it, because you never know what a download might have with it. It could have, one of these Metasploit payloads or another type of virus or payload from other different exploit kits. So just be careful what you download and install, and always have an antivirus up to date and scanning what you download before you execute it. So if you want to learn more, there's many ways you can do that. There's my blog again. You can follow my blog. I'll be posting additional tutorials, walkthroughs, write-ups on tools and events, and I'll be posting more of these videos here as well. Also learned how to use Linux. As you can see, we've done Backtrack Linux. You can do this on Debian or Ubuntu or Fedora. You can do this anywhere. The reason why we do Backtrack is because it's already configured and installed for us. But learn how to use Linux so that you can use more of these tools, because the majority of these tools are Linux and Linux only. So it's great to get used to using Linux as the attacking machine. Use it as for the security tools. Also, learn the basics of networking so you understand exactly what the ports and protocols are and how they work, so that you can learn more of what you're doing, more how to exploit them. And it's also good to learn the tools so that you can use, so you're just not what they call a script kiddie, just running the tools everywhere, don't really know what you're doing. The more you learn the tools, the more you learn how the tools work, the more you understand why the exploit works, and the more you're able to refine it and get a better success rate out of them. And a good thing is to learn the command line interface. Learning the command line interface of Linux is great because, like in this case, for the Metasploitable, there is no graphical user interface. Once we exploit it, we have to know what to do in the command line for post-exploitation, for creating our user and everything. And not only that, a lot of the good tools are command line only, and for those tools that have graphical user interfaces, you have to be careful because you don't really know what you're doing with the graphical user interface. Maybe you can click exploit, but you don't know exactly what it's doing. You just click the button. So having a command line interface is good because you're able to understand exactly what you're doing, and you have full control of it. And not only that, but anything can be scripted on the command line interface. So if you have a lot of repetitive processes, you can just script them. So that's good. So learn the command line interface on a Linux machine. That's a good thing to do. Also, there's a lot of online resources like the Metasploit Unleashed. It's pretty much I guess I can say a wiki of all the aggregated features on Metasploit. That's a good thing to look into. There's also visit the forums. You can look at the Backtrack forums, other security-based forums to where people ask questions or have discussions on topics you might be interested in, or you can ask questions yourself, participate. There's also a little website, SecurityTube. I don't remember if it was .com or .net, but there I've seen a lot of people upload their videos on how to use this tool or how to do this technique or whatever. So that's a good place to look into. They're just videos, security videos of tools and concepts and everything. Also, one more thing is security podcast. I have a pretty long commute to and from school and work. So what I do is I listen to podcasts on the way, and that allows me to not waste the time just driving or listening to music, but I can actually learn something new while I drive. In my case, I listen to Paul.com Security Weekly, and that's just a bunch of security people drinking beers and talking and inviting other security people to talk on the show, talking about their experiences, maybe giving what they call tech segments of different tools or different techniques. Then there's also Security Now by Steve Gibson and Twit, where they just talk about latest in security news and topics more for beginners and everything. It's not focused on practicing, but it's focused on just security in general. And there's a bunch of other podcasts like the Secure a Bit, I believe, and it's a good thing to just you can Google security podcast and there'll be a good list that comes up. You can also come talk to me at any time. For those who are at the University of Houston, you can come see me in my offices at any time, or email me, or see me at the Cougar CS meetings. I'll be more than happy to talk to you about security or help you out with the tools or get you started somewhere. So here's the sources. Backtrack Linux is where you can download Backtrack. Metasploit, you can read and download Metasploit. Nmap as well. And then Metasploit Unleashed, you can get more information and read on Metasploit. And SecurityTube.net, it is where you can watch the videos on different tools. So that's all I have for today. Again, this is part 1 of the series. I'll be creating more parts to it soon. Feel free to comment on my blog or send me a Twitter message or send me an email comment. Give me feedback if I can do better, or if you don't understand, or if you have any requests on any tools you want me to look into or techniques I want to teach. Just feel free to contact me anyway. I'm also on IRC, don't forget that, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye.